Welcome back to GAA Fan TV. My name is Aaron. I hope you're all keeping wonderfully well. It is the football preview show for this weekend's action in the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship and the Tailteann Cup as well. We have a whole host of games to run through. We've 4 big games in the qualifiers. Can Mayo get back on track with a big win against Monaghan, or can Monaghan spoil the party and deliver Mayo's first winless championship season since 2010. You've got Armagh and Tyrone, a historic GAA rivalry going at it blow for blow. We've seen what happened when they played each other in the league, and expect fireworks when those two play each other. Cork and Louth, Clare and Meath also make up the other 2 qualifier games. Big chance for those counties to make the final 12 of the All-Ireland series. And we've also got 4 Tailteann Cup games as well. Who can make the semi-finals, who can progress, and who will be the players to watch out for. It is just myself today, and this also isn't live. It's actually the first video I've done in a while on this channel where it's not live, but I am busy on the day that you're watching this. That will be Thursday. So I said, we'll record this on the Wednesday and pre-record it, all the rest. So gonna be strange not seeing some of the comments coming in and all the rest. But look, Mayo and Monaghan first of all, we will start with that one, and I'm intrigued by this one. I really am, because it's such a hard game to call, and I was thinking about this before I hit the record button, and I really don't know which way I'm going to predict this. Well, I do. I'm going to predict Mayo to get the victory, but at the same time, it's not I feel like 60% of me feels like Mayo could get the victory, but there is that strong part of me that could see Monaghan cause the upset. And is it even that big of an upset? I'm not sure, because Mayo obviously coming in the back of poor form, really. A devastating defeat to Galway in their own backyard, which it was definitely a tough one to take for Mayo supporters. They've obviously been trashed in the league final as well. They've a lot of injuries coming into this game. Potential doubts over Ryan O'Donoghue's fitness, from what I'm hearing. You obviously have no Michael Plunkett. Obviously Oisin Mullen, some questions around his fitness as well. Kevin McLaughlin might not be there. There's all sorts of question marks. Jordan Flynn's injured as well. Mayo have a lot of injuries, and probably even a lot of injuries that we haven't heard of as well. So there's a lot of sort of if, buts and maybes going into this one. And Monaghan, from what I know, don't have any big injuries, and from their perspective, obviously coming in on the back of a disappointing defeat against Derry, but in many ways it was an ambush and they were really sort of caught cold that day. So it is a very intriguing game. It's a clash of styles in some respects as well, where you've got Mayo, who love to play on the front foot, love to press high up the pitch, press up on kickouts, play this very high octane football, which blows teams away at times and catches teams cold, and it certainly caused problems for a lot of teams down the years, including my own county, Dublin, although they probably did switch up their style a little bit when they played ourselves. Monaghan, on the other hand side of things, it is a lot more possession based, and they do retract into a much more defensive shell at times, and try and sort of hit teams on the break and sort of work their way upfield and kick directly into McManus and McCarran. So there's a lot of similarities, a lot of differences between both sides. But I do think the striking factor about this one is going to be Mayo playing at Castlebar at home. Now, I know they got beat by Galway in Castlebar, and they actually, that was the only game they've played in Castlebar this year because of the fact that the stadium was under renovation for the entirety of the league. But I think it's crucial, because I think you see with the Mayo fans and the Mayo supporters, if this game is in the melting pot going into the final 15 minutes, I could see Mayo winning this one. I could see them pulling through. And whilst they do have big injury problems, on the other hand side, Paddy Durcan's going to be back fit, from what I know. I think he's going to be a huge addition to play, whether it's at 5 or at 7. I think it's going to be crucial, or maybe even it plays at 6. One of the best wing backs in the country, in my opinion. And obviously Cillian O'Connor, who's come back, he was obviously back fit when they played Galway. Another game for him, I think, will be crucial, and I'm expecting him to deliver a big performance indeed. And from a Monaghan point of view, whilst Conor McManus is one of the best footballers of the last 10 years, make no mistake about that, hasn't really set the world alight at times this year. And is he past his best? Is he still going to have a big impact in these games? I still think he's a quality footballer, but I don't think we've seen the same levels from him this year as we have in other years. And look, famous last words. He could deliver a big performance, and if he does, I'll be the first to hold my hands up and say, well, he was obviously saving his biggest performance for the biggest occasion, or maybe not the biggest occasion, but I suppose when it matters. Jack McCarron's been brilliant, really set the world alight against the Dubs, destroyed Dublin in more ways than one. Very impressive against Down as well. And I think Monaghan will cause problems for Mayo, and I think it won't be easy for Mayo, and it will be interesting to see, because we've seen Mayo a lot of the times this year and last year as well. It's been a common theme under James Horan to start games poorly, struggle early on, and then give themselves way too much to do. And then finally, in the final 10 to 15 minutes, they seem to sort of just, wake up, and there seems to be a flick of a switch, and the substitutes, whether it's James Carr or Kevin McLaughlin or, Fergal Boland coming off the bench, seem to make a bit of an impact, and all of a sudden Mayo wake up and start playing football. I feel like if they do that this time, they mightn't get away with it, because there's only so much time as you can play with four, and I feel like that's almost what happened to them when they played Galway. On the other hand side of the Brett, though, Monaghan are this type of team where they can have a lead going into the final 10 minutes and sort of bottle it in many ways. They've done this on so many occasions, and that's why you could see a scenario where Monaghan have a 6-7 point lead going into the final 10 minutes, and Mayo somehow managed to crawl their way back, and we're all left thinking, how on earth have Mayo won that game? You could see it developing, but at the same time, I think from a Mayo fan perspective, and I think from James Horan's perspective and the players' perspective, they want to get out of that habit and start the game fast. And I think, in my mind, I feel like there's going to be a sort of a kick from this Mayo side in this game. I feel like they're going to want to right the wrongs of the last couple of games. Obviously, they've had a month break. They've had a lot of time to think about this one. I think with Monaghan, they've had some good performances under Banty McEnany. They've done very well to stay in Division 1 over the last couple of seasons. But I do think in the big moments, they just don't quite have the same quality as a lot of the other top teams in the country. And that's why I feel like Mayo narrowly will come through this one. But look, with the injuries, that's going to be the big question. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see that starting 15. No Ryan O'Donoghue. That could be worrying if Monaghan do set up, quite defensive and sort of limit Mayo kicking from the scoring zones. That could be an issue, because they don't have too many players that can kick from distance without Ryan O'Donoghue. Obviously, Cillian O'Connor, exceptional shooter. Matthew Rowan could be big as well. The midfield battle is going to be another interesting one, because Noel Kearns probably one of the most underrated midfielders in the country. So that's going to be very, very fascinating in and around the middle. And I thought Matty Rowan was marshalled very well throughout the Galway game, to be fair. So it's going to be a very intriguing game, but I'm going to back Mayo narrowly to come through Monaghan by 2 points. I think it's going to be very close. It's going to go one way or the other. It might be decided on a decision. Mayo's bench may be a little bit stronger, although the injuries, you might argue so. Could you see the likes of Aidan Orme maybe coming off the bench and making a bit of an impact? James Carr as well. So, even with the likes of those injuries that I mentioned, I'm going to back Mayo narrowly. But as I said, if you have no Ryan O'Donoghue, no Oisin Mullen, and obviously you don't have Jordan Flynn in there, it's going to be tough. It's going to be very, very tough. But I'm just going to back Mayo. I feel like there's a part of me as well as a Dublin fan that's seen Mayo so many times make their way through the qualifiers when you least expect it. Like every time you write them off, they have a way of coming back. I know 2018 was the anomaly there, and maybe this is their own 2018 year. But I don't know. I feel like they have credibility built up in the bank there in some respects. So, yeah, I'm going to back Mayo to narrowly come through Monaghan by 2 points. We'll then discuss Cork and Louth, which is happening a little bit earlier on the Saturday at 2 p.m. at Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Cork getting their home game at Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and they take on Mickey Hart's Louth side. Louth coming in on the back of that 16-point defeat to Kildare, which was definitely a result that would have hurt them, in terms of how big of a margin it was. I think a lot of people expected that one to maybe be a little bit closer and a potential banana skin for Kildare, but they certainly did come through it very, very comfortably. And Cork, on the other hand side, coming in maybe slightly more positive, even though they got beat by 12 points by Kerry, but they did show a bit of fight in that game, a bit of heart, and that's certainly something that has been lacking for Cork football really since their last victory over Kerry in 2020. So it's an interesting one. Before Cork and Louth played in the championship, if you had said these two would play each other, you would have said Louth. You probably would have backed them. But after seeing Louth against Kildare and Cork against Kerry, the narrative probably will be Cork at home should have enough to come through and get the victory. But look, I think Louth, you know, and Mickey Hart's side, I think this could be a shock. I really do. I could see Louth pulling off something quite magical here. I mean, the big question for Louth is how are they going to stop the influence of Stephen Sherlock? I mean, in 6 games this year, 1 goal and 42 points. Scored some excellent points as well against Kerry on different displays. I remember that one moment where he bounced the ball, he shimmied it and then hit it with his outside of his boot. It was an extraordinary point. But at the same time, how are Cork going to deal with the influence that is Samuel Roy? I mean, 569 this year in 10 games. An extraordinary season from his point of view. It's a very hard one to call. I mean, Cork, for me, are one of those sides that maybe when they play bigger opposition, they play a lot better than they do. When they played Galway, for example, they looked very impressive at different times. Even though they got beat, they actually, you know, gave Galway a run for their money. And you've seen them against Kerry down the years put up big performances. And sometimes it's in these games against the lesser sides that they struggle. And it's going to be curious. It's going to be interesting to see what way both sides set up. I could see Louth setting up sort of in that Mickey Hart style. You know, a lot of men behind the ball, a lot of men inside their own 45. And then in a similar fashion to how they beat Limerick, they'll try and break with pace and, you know, get, Conor Grimes on the ball. They'll be looking from overlapping runs from Samuel Roy in there as well. And I think you could see Louth causing problems from Cork on the counter-attack. Ian Maguire, obviously around the middle, the midfield battle is going to be crucial, I think, for Cork, because you're going to see Cork, I think, with the majority of possession, and they'll certainly have more of the ball than Louth. But I'm going to back Louth to pull off the upset here, and it'll be a huge result for the wee county, because when you look at the size of Louth, you know, compared to Cork, I think this will be a famous win for the wee county. But I'm going to back them. I'm going to back them to narrowly come through. I just think they're going to pick Cork off in the counter-attack. I think although Cork showed some positive signs against Kerry, I still think there's a lot of vulnerabilities there defensively. I mean, Kerry weren't probably at the races that day. They were nowhere near their best, and yet still finished with 23 points. So I'm going to back Louth to narrowly come through Cork by 2 points. Clare and Meath is another intriguing one. And what I would say is, you know, looking at these qualifiers, at least all 4 games are very hard games to call. Like, I could be wrong here, but I don't think any of these games are going to be overly one-sided. And, you know, you could argue the case with a lot of these different games, to be perfectly honest. I think a lot of, you know, these 4 games are very evenly matched, in my opinion. And Clare going up against Meath, I mean, it's been a disappointing year for Meath, hasn't it? It's been a very disappointing year from their point of view. I mean, they haven't really got going at all. I mean, obviously put up a big win against Wicklow, but against Dublin, they were very, very poor, very lethargic, and you just wonder, is there one last push from Andy McEntee as Meath manager? Because, you know, I think a defeat here, even if they get through this and lose in the next round of the qualifiers, it's going to be hard to see how he stays on next year unless Meath do something, you know, incredibly special between now and the end of the year. And going away to Clare as well. And Clare, a strange one with Clare, because, you know, they'll have been looking at Limerick in that Munster final and thinking, that could have been us. That could have been us getting a 20-point hammering to Kerry. You know, but I do think Clare, on the flip side of that, when you look at the work and the groundwork that Colm Collins has done for this Clare side, and the quality of Owen Cleary, the tenacity of David Tubridy, the commitment levels from him over the last couple of years, and dedication from him has been absolutely extraordinary. You've got, you know, Joe Gannon coming in. Keelan Sexton's been exceptional this year. Clare's top scorer in the championship. So they've got, or top scorer in the league, I should say. So Clare have got a lot of very good players, and to get beat by Limerick on penalties would be a tough one to take, because there's been times where you've thought that Clare, you know, will be that team that are the second best team in Munster, and they just haven't quite been able to sort of get that day out in a Munster final when they have been on the other side of the draw. So it'll be an intriguing one, to be perfectly honest. Meath did beat Clare in the penultimate game in Division 2 of the National Football League, and that was in Ennis as well. So maybe that will give Meath a bit of confidence, the fact that they won there already, albeit that game maybe didn't have as much significance as this one. I think Meath were fairly already safe by then, and I think Clare were already ruled out of a promotion chase. So Yeah, I'm going to back Clare narrowly. At home, I think they'll just about have enough. As I said before, Meath's mentality, unfortunately, is a big question at times. And the going gets tough, they very rarely are able to respond, to be perfectly honest. And I do worry if Clare build up a lead that Meath mightn't have enough to turn it around. With Meath, a lot of the time, it depends how they start a game. If they start a game well, they'll be able to stick in the game. And Clare, they do have a lot of very good, talented players. Jordan Morris, an exceptional footballer, as we've seen before. Cathal Hickey's been a great young lad, obviously coming through. Matthew Costello can cause a lot of problems. We've seen Dublin have problems with him, obviously back in 2021. Jack O'Connor's come into the side this year and look quite bright. So Meath do have quality footballers, and if you were looking at both teams, you'd arguably say Meath have better players than Clare. But I just think Clare at home, with their fans as well, I just think they're going to narrowly come through Meath by 2 points. Armagh and Tyrone is the last of the All-Ireland qualifiers, and if the last 3 games were hard to call, this one is also possibly going to be very hard to call as well. And Tyrone, I mean, what can you say about Tyrone? In a similar fashion to Mayo, they just haven't really had the best of years. I mean, just 2 wins, or 3 wins altogether, I think, across 10 games in the entirety of the year. Those wins against, ironically enough, against Mayo, Kerry and Fermanagh. The only side to have beaten Kerry, coincidentally, in 2022. And actually the only side to have beaten Kerry, going back in the last 2 seasons in both league and championship. So Tyrone do have that to their name. And I think if Tyrone get to Croke Park, they then become a dangerous force, in my opinion. They're certainly a side that, as a Dublin fan, if Tyrone were to progress, I would not want to play them in an All-Ireland quarter-final, because they're the type of team that just has a habit of pulling out big results when you least expect it. For Armagh, look, I want to see a big performance from Armagh, to be honest. I mean, I've been disappointed with them in the championship this year. They started the league so well. Obviously getting wins over Dublin, the win over Tyrone as well. Rian O'Neill shooting the lights out. Tailed off massively sort of towards the end of the league. They didn't really have a lot to play for. And then just a very flat performance against Donegal. They got all their players back from the suspensions. Obviously Rian O'Neill was back and eligible to play, but they just didn't deliver against Donegal, and it was just very, very comfortable from Donegal, unfortunately. And you've seen the scenes when Derry won the Ulster title. A lot of us did expect Armagh to be that team, to sort of compete, maybe win an Ulster title with the players that they have in Rian O'Neill, Oisin O'Neill around the middle. You've obviously got some very talented players. Stephen Campbell can cause a lot of problems as well. Conor Turbot, Jason Duffy's been a great sort of player coming off the bench as well. So it just hasn't really clicked into gear for Armagh. And I think this game, to be honest, I think people thought the Derry Donegal game was not a great watch. I'm not sure this one will be, to be perfectly honest. If you're of that mindset, I've said before, I thought the Derry Donegal game was a good watch. Personally, that was my opinion. I thought it was a good game because I thought it was intriguing. You were watching both sides waiting for opportunities. It was a bit of a tactical sort of chess match in many ways, a tactical arm wrestle, you could call it. And if every team just played the same way, it'd be boring. You know what I mean? Sometimes that's what hurling gets criticised for, because it's just the same sort of tactics in every game, although that isn't the case anymore, but that was certainly maybe the case 10-15 years ago. So look, I think it's going to be cagey. I think it's going to be close. I have a sneaky feeling Armagh could pull through, but at the same time, I think I gave a prediction on the JMAC podcast during the week that Armagh would win, but I think at the same time, it's very hard to see. Like, you could just see Tyrone edging it at the Athletic Grounds. Armagh haven't got a big championship win under McGeaney. Their only big wins under Kieran McGeaney have come in the league when they beat Dublin and beat Tyrone. But other than that, those 2 games are irrelevant now, really. They don't make for much. So I'm going to back Tyrone by a point. Maybe having Rory Canavan potentially on the bench to come off, that could be a big sort of trump card for this Tyrone side. You're expecting Darren McCurry to do damage on that Armagh defence. And possibly Brian Kennedy in around the middle could have a big game from a Tyrone perspective. So, yeah, I'm going to back Tyrone narrowly to come through Armagh. I think it will be close, but just Tyrone. And I could be wrong here, I really could. I'm going to say as well, extra time, Tyrone by a point. We'll move on to the Tailteann Cup games then. First up you have Carlow versus Westmeath. Now, intriguing one, this one. I mean, Westmeath will be serious favourites, but I think Tipperary were serious favourites when they went down to Netwatch Cullen Park, and incredibly were beaten by 2 points in one of the shocks of the weekend. And Carlow, are they writing themselves a bit of a storyline here to potentially do something unthinkable and something magical in the Tailteann Cup? It'd be great to see. It'd be great to see Carlow go on a run and Carlow do something special. Do I see it against a Westmeath side that, are probably one of the favourites for the tournament? To be honest, I don't. I don't see how Carlow, who have struggled hugely defensively throughout the entirety of the league. Now, they've done very well, to be fair, against Tipperary, limiting them from 110, although Tipperary did have a lot of wides in the game and missed chances. I don't see Westmeath doing the same, and I think with John Heslin, Ronan O'Toole, Luke Loughlin, very, quality footballers, Ray Cannellan around the middle, I think Westmeath should have enough. The worry from a Westmeath perspective is, against Laois, from what I heard and from what I've seen on the Sunday game, they weren't exactly brilliant, to be honest. They didn't exactly, shoot the world alight, and Laois made that a closer game than people expected. So, Westmeath haven't put teams away this year, and that could be a bit of a worry. And with the Carlow fans behind them, and with that result against Tipperary, it might give Carlow a slight edge maybe if the game is sort of level going into the final 10 minutes. But I think I'm going to narrowly, maybe not narrowly, I'm going to back Westmeath to eventually get the job done by 4 points. You've got Offaly versus New York. I think this actually, I don't know, maybe someone can let me know in the comments down below, but is this the first time New York are ever playing a championship game in Ireland? It might be, unless they came to Ireland in the early 1900s or 1950s or something like that. But quite incredible that that this is happening, and fair play. Great to see New York involved in the Tailteann Cup, playing a team that they've probably never played in the championship before. So that's certainly a great viewing. And but to be honest, from a New York perspective, I mean, Carlow was probably the team, with all due respect to Carlow, that you'd want to play, and that was a draw I wanted to see, because it would have been great to see New York or Carlow, one of those two, progress into the semi-finals. But look, Offaly haven't come through the last two games, haven't come through quite a tough game in some respects against Wexford, but they obviously overcame that. They've come past Wicklow as well. You've got Rory McNamee fit and firing once again. Anton Sullivan's been looking good for Offaly. John Mon's got a bit of momentum now behind this Offaly side, and as I said in the Tailteann Cup predictions, I felt like if there was a dark horse, if there was a team to hang your hat on, Offaly may just be that side, because with some of the under-20s sort of making little cameo appearances off the bench as well, they're a tough team to beat, and at home as well. Once again at home, it's going to be tough to see if anyone can get the better of them. Look, for New York, it'll be interesting to see obviously their style. I mean, they were very defensive against Sligo and it nearly worked. Adrian Varley, very, very good footballer. Captain Jamie Boyle's done a very good job for them as well. I think this will be close, to be fair. I think it will be close, maybe going into the final sort of 20 to 15 minutes. I would expect Offaly's sort of match fitness and match sharpness to be enough to see them through. The fact that they've played, 2 games already in this Tailteann Cup. They've played a whole host of league games. They've played in the championship already as well. Like, they have what New York don't have, and that's game time. That's been able to work on a system, try out different players, time with the management. New York, unfortunately, don't have that. And that's why I feel like New York should have been in the preliminary round, to be perfectly honest. But look, I think Offaly will have enough. They'll come through it in the end by 4 points. I think New York will cause Offaly a couple of problems. And it will be closer than people expect, but I think Offaly should have enough. Then on the other side of the draw, or on the northern section, shall we say, you've got Leitrim against Sligo and Fermanagh against Cavan. Leitrim against Sligo, two sides very familiar with each other, and Fermanagh and Cavan very familiar with each other as well. Leitrim, good impressive result against Antrim, albeit Antrim, had a whole host of players who weren't available for that game, and I suppose the knock-on effects of that was Enda McGinley obviously stepping away. So, I mean, it was hard to probably judge them. They'll certainly get a much tougher test going into this one. But at home, Andy Moran, is he building something ever so slightly? Could this be, a big possibility for Leitrim to get a day out in Croke Park in the semi-finals? I think there's a huge opportunity for it. I really do. Ryan O'Rourke's looked very good. Keith Byrne's been shooting the lights out again. Tom Pror coming up from the under-20s has made a big impact. So I've been impressed with Leitrim. You know, they play a good brand of football as well, a good attacking style under Andy Moore. And I think this is going to be a cracking game. I really do. I think this is going to be a very, very entertaining game, because Sligo, as we've seen, you know, were pushed, you know, very, very closely by London. And, you know, they have their fair share of very good attacking players themselves in Niall Murphy and plenty of others. So plenty of very, very good attacking players in that Sligo side. You've obviously got, you know, Pat Spillane Jr. coming off the bench. But I think Leitrim, for me, at home, I think are going to come through by 2 points. Maybe it might be a bit of a shock. Maybe some people would edge towards Sligo with the, I suppose, attacking talent of Niall Murphy. But I just think, in my opinion, that Leitrim are going to narrowly do it. So, yeah, Leitrim by 2. And last, but definitely least, well, not definitely least, to be fair, a little bit harsh on the Fermanagh and Cavan men there, but Fermanagh and Cavan at home. Look, to be fair, this is going to be maybe not the, you know, most entertaining game in the Tailteann Cup this weekend, but I do think it will be probably the most intriguing, I think, because there's a storyline here. You know, you obviously have Fermanagh, who beat Cavan last year in the Tailteann Cup. They stunned Cavan, or not in the Tailteann Cup, sorry, in Division 3 in the league. That was obviously a huge result that led to Fermanagh staying in Division 3 and Cavan ultimately getting relegated. Royce McManaman was the man in charge of Fermanagh in that game, and he's now part of Cavan's setup. So there's a lot of sort of moving factors sort of going into this game that will make it very interesting. With the game being at Brewster Park, could you see Cavan pull off a bit of an upset, or sorry, Fermanagh pull off an upset? Is it that big of an upset, really? I think this is going to be a tough test, and for me, this is the draw that Cavan did not want. I think Cavan would have rather played Fermanagh in Croke Park in a Tailteann Cup semi or a final, but to go away to Fermanagh, it's going to be tough. We've seen the job that Sean Quigley did and the game that he played when he took on Cavan, you know, in the last game. And you know what? I think there's a strong possibility that the winner of this game goes on to win the Tailteann Cup, because I think the momentum that it would give Fermanagh if they beat Cavan would be so crucial. It really, really would. It would give them so much belief going into those semi-finals. And I think for Cavan as well, to take out Fermanagh at this stage as well will give them a lot of belief. So there's a lot of moving factors. You know, who's going to stop Paddy Lynch doing what he does at one end? Who's going to stop Sean Quigley at the other? Kieran Corrigan, been very good as well. Conal Jones, Ryan Jones, the Jonas brothers, if you want to call them. Well, not the Jonas brothers, but the Jones brothers have been very good from a Fermanagh perspective. It's a hard one to call because we haven't seen too much of them. So, you know, with a lot of these teams, you're sort of just going by the players and who's scored what and who's done what. You know, it's a hard one to judge in some respects, but I think I'm going to narrowly back Cavan to come through by 2 points. I've gone against Cavan in my predictions a couple of times this year, and it's gone against me. So, you know, knowing that, Cavan will probably lose this one, but I don't know. Maybe if I jinxed them, I'm not sure. But I think, given how well they've played so far this year, given their performance against Down, their performance against Donegal, they should have enough to come through by 2 points. But yeah, ultimately, let me know your predictions in the comments down below. We will get back to you know, some live podcasts next week. As I said, just a different one for this week. But there will be plenty of reactions out this weekend for all sorts of action in the football and hurling championship. If you want to see the hurling podcast, that was out yesterday with John Keogh. Very in-depth discussion looking at Clare and Limerick, and also the meeting of Galway, Kilkenny in the Joe McDonagh Cup final as well. So if you enjoy the hurling just as you enjoy the football, make sure to check that one out. It is already up there on the channel. Yeah, I will see you all soon. My name's Aaron. Talk to you soon.